guys, welcome back to the Camp Chronicles. So today we've got a topic for you to discuss that personally I don't think gets discussed enough. Everybody always talks about going to camp for your first summer, going for your first time, but not a lot of people actually discuss what it's really like to go back as a returner. So we're going to kind of delve into that a little bit today and discuss all the emotions that we had and everything we experienced going back to camp as a returner twice. So how did you feel when you went back for like your second summer?
Going back for the second summer was such a crazy feeling. I remember like the time felt so long from the last summer to arriving back in America. But when I arrived back in America, it felt like the time had went so fast and I'd never left. So
Yeah.
then I remember we were waiting in the airport for ages because we were kind of like a welcome committee type of thing for the new staff
Hmm.
coming. And I remember sitting in the airport and I was like really, really excited for everybody turning up. And then everyone turned up. And then all of a sudden, I just felt like this kind of like overwhelming anxiety come over me, which I was so
Hmm.
surprised by because I was the returner. And I could imagine so many people coming off the plane for the first time were feeling the exact same feelings I was,
Yeah.
but you'd expect that I would be so excited. So I remember people started coming over and I felt like so anxious. And then the
Hmm.
bus ended up pulling up and then like we all kind of sat together and we were talking to a lot of the newbies about like the feelings and what was going to happen when they got to camp. And then like I started getting really excited. And I remember I was going around the roads, and because they were so familiar, because I'd driven around them so many times, like my first summer, I remember like getting to a certain point and then I was like, okay, we're only like 30 minutes away. Then I was like, right, we're 15 minutes away. And then like, then we were 10 minutes away. And then I remember them 10 minutes felt like the longest time ever because it was like the anticipation, the fact that you were about to turn up at camp. And then I remember the buses rolled through the gate and like the feeling that like rushed through my body at the time was like I could have cried with excitement. I was
Hmm.
so happy. And I just felt like I was home again, like I was back where I was meant to be. And I remember getting off the bus and everyone was like jumping in each other's arms and hugging and like nearly crying with happiness. And it was just like the most insane feeling ever that like can only be topped going back every year and getting off the bus again.
I think that does happen a lot though when you get off the bus you kind of I mentioned it in a previous episode, like whenever I'm overwhelmed I want to cry, and like getting off the bus when you get back to camp, or even watching other people get off the bus and waiting like to see your returning friends get back off, it makes you so overwhelmed, doesn't it? And it's just like trying to hold back all the tears.
It fills your heart, it makes you whole, doesn't it?
But when I went back for my second summer as a lead, there was a much smaller like arrival group, so we didn't have like the full bus turn up from camp. We actually flew into the airport, and then we had to get two trains to get us to Middletown train station near camp, and then we got picked up in the minibus from there. So second summer, I think honestly there was probably like 6 or 7 of us that arrived at camp all together. But then this year when I went back, I'd been in the city for a few days beforehand with my mum and my sister, like for a bit of a holiday. And then my bestie Stephen had flown in from Australia and he met us. So then me and Stephen were just travelling into camp by ourselves. We ended up getting the train, just us two, and then got picked up from the train station. But I literally felt like I was pooping my pants. Like it was late at night by the time we arrived. I think it was probably like 8 o'clock or half 8 probably. It was dark and it was just only the two of us arriving. And at this point, all of the high ropes and all of the lifeguard staff were there already. So there was quite a lot of new people that were had in those two groups this summer. And like me and Stephen both just like rocked up, and it was kind of like there wasn't that like massive like, oh my god, like all these people are arriving at once. It was literally just the two of us, and I felt like I was like, I don't know where to put myself right now. I just felt so awkward because like you obviously want to like meet everyone new and like make friends and like talk to everyone, but everyone was already kind of sat in little groups and stuff, and I wasn't about to just like waddle over by myself and be like, hi friends. So yeah, I never had the big kind of returning sort of thing like in the way you did with everybody coming in on the bus. Mine was just more sort of like little groups arriving. It was
Yeah.
still obviously really nice, but it was a little bit more nerve-wracking. And like you were saying, even as a returner, like you do still have that bit of anxiety.
It's just a natural feeling to have, isn't it? But like,
Yeah.
how did you find like settling back into camp, like in your return and summit?
Yeah, so orientation is about 2 weeks for the first lot of arrivals. So by the time I got there, it was, I think, about 10 or 11 days. Like obviously we moved into the cabins where there's like some people were in there already. We're just in like little orientation bunks before we get given our cabin assignments for the summer, and then we'll like split off and move around. But there's always kind of a mixture in the cabins of some people that are returners and some people that are new, like first time during orientation. So it's nice that I think they always put a mixture of like first timers and returners in the orientation cabins together. Just helps to like mix everyone all together as well.
It's good to be able to have the returners in there to kind of help the newbies as well, and
Yeah.
it makes you be able to connect. And so, like, say, there's an activity period up at the basketball court as a newbie, it's
Mhm.
quite daunting, like finding your way around camp at first. I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but my camp's quite big. But once you've been there for like a week or two, it feels so small. But it's nice to have like a returner in the bunk to be able to be like say to the newbie, oh, let's like all walk up together.
I don't know if it's like the same at your camp. Like, obviously, I'm assuming it probably is. Obviously, when you go back as a returner, you want to see like all your friends that are also there, like, and that you've known for either one summer or a few summers. You might have seen them like outside of camp, and you really want to like go back and catch up with them. So it's really nice to do that. Sometimes, like, I think I'm definitely in my head about it, but this just shows how it can be funny going back as a returner still. That like almost new people don't want to talk to me because they probably think they've already got their friends, they're not going to want to talk to me, so I'm not going to bother. And again, I don't necessarily think that that's the case, but that's just something that I'll kind of get in my head about. And at camp, like, I would say for the most part, everyone's friends with everyone. I make as much effort as I can to try and get to know everyone's name, or try and find something about one person that I can like relate to them where their name will stick in my head. But then yeah, it kind of makes me think like, do they really want to get to know me? Like, or do they just assume that I'm not going to want to get to know them? It's like a weird sort of dynamic, isn't it?
I totally agree with everything you've just said there. I think in my second summer as a returner, I definitely drifted to start with towards, like the people that I hadn't seen, especially like my really close, like she's one of my best friends, Dylan. I tried to spend a lot of time with Dylan because I hadn't seen her for 10 months. And
Yeah.
then because of like my circumstances at the time, I just kind of naturally drifted towards returners. But at the
Hmm.
same time, we had the feeling as returners that a lot of the newbies just didn't want to kind of be involved with us. And there was a huge group, like my second summer, that kind of stuck together, like newbies wise. And like it made the returners kind of be a bit like apprehensive towards going over because it's like
Hmm.
there was only so many of us, but then there was like a massive large group of them, and it was kind of like, well, they were wanting to be their friends, so
Hmm.
it kind of made the returners like only really stick with each other.
Hmm.
But then going back to like my third summer, it was so nice because like the returners and the newbies just integrated together straight away, and it was just so natural, and it was almost like they weren't newbies and you weren't a returner, like you were all one.
And it's funny, isn't it, how like that's not what actually is happening always. It's just kind of like you get in your own head about like thinking about it, don't you? I feel like other things as well for me is like obviously we're doing this podcast, like we love talking about camp and want to try and like provide as much information on our own experiences as possible to everyone. And at camp, like I almost would want to like prepare everyone that's new, like what to expect. And then at the same time, I don't want to come across as like oh my God, she thinks she knows everything about camp sort
Yeah.
of like personality. And it's not necessarily because I do think I know everything about camp, because I absolutely don't. But I almost want to just like share my experience with like new people just to prepare them as much as possible. So it's kind of like sometimes I think maybe I'm doing too much and I come across as like a know-it-all, but then at the same time I just wish that like someone had done that to me when I was in that position. So it's just funny, isn't it? Like you kind of like still coming back to camp, returning, even though you've done it before, you still have these sort of like worries, don't you?
Definitely. And I mean, talking about worries, like let's discuss when the kids return. I remember being so nervous that the kids like in my division wouldn't remember me or wouldn't have a big reaction to seeing me. But actually they did have a great reaction, and it was definitely some nerves that I had as a returner. How was it for you? Because obviously I know you had different kids, didn't you, returning?
Yeah, so I had obviously one group of kids I had them in 10th grade, my first summer I went, and then when I returned for my second summer I had 10th grade again, but obviously those kids had moved up, so it was a new group of girls. They're quite like secretive at camp about, well, not secretive necessarily, but they won't tell you who you've got until like almost a few days before the kids arrive, just because they don't like want all the kids finding out and things like that. Inevitably the kids did find out. So my girls that I'd had the first summer, they're messaging me like, "Oh my God, you don't have us, I can't believe it." And then like obviously like at first I was a bit gutted because I was like, it obviously would have been so nice to have those kids again, but then the group of girls that I did get were all amazing and I still had a really good summer. But I think it was kind of not scary, but I was a little bit nervous going into it because I was like, okay, I had such a good bond and a great relationship with all those girls at the end of my first summer. I know they're gonna like move up now and they're gonna have new counsellors. It's almost like I'm starting fresh. So it was kind of like being a first time staff member again because I was totally starting fresh with these girls. But then every staff member that I spoke to was like, the group of girls that you've been given are a really, really good bunk. So like you should be excited, which obviously I was. And then they all arrived and it was great. But I was that bit nervous. It kind of felt like I was starting fresh again.
Yeah.
But another thing as well, actually, obviously like talking about like other staff giving their input on kids that you might be getting is if you're a returner, let's say you might be allocated a different bunk to like the one you've had the previous summer, and you might hear like, this girl was really mean last year and she was horrible to all the other girls in her bunk, or oh, this girl like the other girls don't talk to and they kind of like push her out. Or sometimes like kids will be like labeled at camp, or they might behave one way one summer. You kind of need to give the kids like somewhat of a fresh slate like going in, because if you think how much you can change within a 10-month period of being at camp for your first summer and going back for your second, those kids also can change so much within a 10-month period. So you might have a bunk where one kid might be branded as the bad kid, they're the troublemaker, they're the one you've got to watch out for. Kind of don't go into that your next summer with such a negative outlook on that kid, because they could have changed so much in 10 months and matured loads and come and be like, you think like it's like having a different kid in the bunk. But yeah, kind of try not to have too much of a preconception and judge kids before they even arrive and you even have time to properly spend with them. Did you have that in your bunk? Obviously you had the same girls again. Was there any times where you were kind of like, you felt like they'd changed a lot, or?
And like every single one of them had changed so much in,
Mhm.
10 months that they're not at camp. They're getting older, you know, their circumstances at home may have changed. They might not have had a great school year, or they might have had a brilliant school year. We have girls, we all know, we've all grown up as women now, the changes that we have, moods, hormones, stuff like that. Like, they definitely changed, and I think it's something my division leader taught me, and someone like I'm really close with now personally. She said to me, kind of going into second summer, is all of the memories that you had and the moments with these kids last year, obviously don't forget them, but you're
Mhm.
going into a second summer and you have to start fresh. You've
Mhm.
made these bonds and you've made these great memories with them, but anything that happened, anything that you remember, you don't go in, don't tell other counsellors, oh, well, this kid done this last year and this kid's a bit
Mhm.
like this. You've just got to start fresh and like start new. You've already got that bond with them. As my camp director always says, you've got the money in the bank with them, but you have to always start fresh, because you don't know how much they've changed over them 10 months. They could have been, like you said, a troublemaker last summer, but this summer they might be the absolute angel camper that you have, who helps
Yeah.
everybody, who's always up first out of bed, who always is like, can I help you with this? Like, you know, they could have completely changed, and it's just so important not to kind of be like to new counsellors around you, like, oh, well, this kid was a bit like this last summer.
I think another thing is, like you were saying, obviously, if you're coming back with the same group of kids, like my third summer, I had the same group of kids again, is like, if one summer maybe they were branded as the troublemaker, take into consideration that they may think that you're automatically going to treat them differently because of that. Or they might have, that kid might have worries again about coming back to camp and thinking, they're my counsellor again, they're going to hate me already because I did X, Y, and Z last summer. Do you know, like, you've got to remember that they are kids, obviously, as mature as they do seem sometimes. Like, they are still kids and, like, they do still have worries like that as well. So, kind of just like treat them like you would anyone else. And I think that's also the same with staff members is, you know, you might previous summer have had like some sort of drama. There's always going to be drama at camp, let's be real. The degrees of drama will vary, but you might have had like drama or a falling out with one staff member like in a previous summer, but if you're coming back here next year, you're still going to be working alongside them. You don't have to be best friends, but give them a fresh slate. Like, can't be like dismissive or ignore them because your kids will pick up on that as well. I don't know what your kids were like in terms of picking up on drama, but it
Everything.
might not even be drama, but like the tiniest little thing, they'll be like, you were spending a lot of time talking to them, or you used to talk to them loads last summer. Why don't you talk to them anymore? Don't they? They pick up on little things like that.
Every little thing that you do and the kids see, they'll remember. But like if you, for instance, spend some time talking at a specialty area to one of the specialists while like the kids
Mhm.
say, for instance, they're at soccer and
Mhm.
you stood talking to the soccer specialist for 5 minutes and the kids happen to see that you're taking interest in speaking to this person. It's like, is that your boyfriend? Is that your girlfriend? Like, it's so
They
funny.
do, don't
Kids
they?
just pick up on everything and like they make the most randomest, craziest stories up in their head, and like all of a sudden, like you're married to this person that you've just had a 2 minute conversation about talking like about what's going to be on for dinner tonight. Like you're so excited that it's going to be mac and cheese, but all of a sudden to them kids, you've just literally like eloped.
The spin off some wild stories. And I think relating to that, another thing about like obviously we're talking about other staff members returning is sometimes, or it happened to me in my first summer, the group of there were 6 of us that travelled around after camp. They were probably the people, well, they were the people that I was closest with. Of that, there was only myself and Stephen that actually returned to camp second summer. And I think when you end one summer having such a like close knit group of friends, and then you go back and you start again. Although like Stephen was there, I'm upper camp and I'm on girls' side. He's lower camp and on boys' side. So we very rarely overlapped during camp. There's still other friends that came back, but it can still feel quite lonely, like even though you are surrounded with people all the time. And like if you do go back to camp and you do experience that, I don't think you should kind of feel like you're the only one. Like I think a lot of people do feel like that returning. How was it for you? Did you kind of have the same experience?
All of my closest friends returned to camp. So it was
Mhm.
really nice to have everyone around, but I kind of felt like maybe in my second summer I lent more on, you know, them returning friends and didn't so much make as many meaningful first time friendships that I wish I did in my like returning summer. But then
Yeah.
this summer just gone, I'd say 10% of my friends that I made in my first summer returned.
Mhm.
And again, they were similar to you. They were on boy side, but they were like on upper camp, or they were girl side, they were upper camp. And because I was still lower camp, I barely got to see them. So then
Mhm.
this year I was kind of starting fresh, making new friendships, and it was really nerve wracking because the people that didn't return were kind of like the people I would go to and be like, you know what, I'm having a really rubbish day today. I'm not
Yeah.
feeling too great. They'd give you that hug that you need at camp,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden your battery's gone from 20% to, I don't know, say 70%. I didn't
Mhm.
have that support system anymore this summer, so it was really nerve wracking. But
Mhm.
then also, I enjoyed returning this summer and not. I didn't enjoy not having them there because I would have loved having them there. But the good thing about not having them there was that I had to branch out and I had to make new friends. And then I ended up making like such amazing friends this summer who I'm so grateful for, you know, and who I consider some of my closest friends. Like, it's just, it makes it a lot easier, I think, when people that you're so close to in previous summers don't return, because you have to put yourself out there and you don't just
Yeah.
naturally drift towards kind of the people
Yeah.
that you used to.
Yeah. I know another thing is like there was a lot of people that I was friends with and friendly with in the first summer that came back, but it just wasn't the people that I was closest with that came back. But then that gave me a chance to get closer to those people so that were
Yeah.
there in first summer that I knew and I was obviously friends with, but wasn't as close with. And then coming back this summer again, a lot of people didn't come back that I was then much friendlier with from the second summer. But I think I was almost kind of like used to it. I think second summer I did feel a little bit like lonely and like isolated. But then I think again I was just kind of in my head about it. There was still loads of people that I was there that I was really good friends with, and I don't want, if anyone listens to this, I don't want you thinking that I don't appreciate and love yous, because I do. But I think this is just an emotion and a feeling that you can have as a returner. I think you finish camp on such a high. You come back and you're almost like starting fresh. So kind of if you are having those feelings, then don't worry about it because it will be fine and it does get better.
And it just goes to show though, like this is our first time having a conversation about returning to camp,
Mm.
like in detail with each other. And
Mm.
we're saying that like we kind of had similar feelings to each other in like the second, like in our first summer returning. So I can
Yeah.
guarantee that there's so many more people out there that return for like the second summer that probably feel the
Mhm.
same way as us.
And this is probably going to go off on a totally different tangent, actually, but this is kind of referring back to something we spoke about earlier, is about the kids picking up on everything. If there's like one bit of advice that I can give to someone that is going to camp for the first time and is possibly thinking about returning, it is to know your boundaries and be careful of how much you tell your kids. During orientation, I'm sure you will have like these sorts of discussions, but especially like the older ones, I mean the younger ones probably still do it as well, but the older ones will pry and they'll want to know about everything, and sometimes they will bring up topics that maybe you find a bit inappropriate, or they want to know what happens on a night off. They're going to want to know who's getting with who with the staff, and you need to kind of like know the boundaries and draw the line of what you tell your kids and what you don't, especially I think when it comes to telling them other people's business. Like if you're going to camp for the first time and you think, ugh, I'm not going to come back. Like sometimes at mine, they like to have a confession night on the last night where they try and get the counsellors to tell them everything. Like, I'm not going to lie, my kids probably hated me for it and found me boring, but I didn't really tell them much. If anything, to be honest, I think I actually just went to sleep one night when they did that. But if you're as a first timer and think, oh, I'm probably not going to return to camp, I'm going to tell my kids everything, be considerate that some of these staff members that you're telling the kids about and telling them all these stories about might go back to camp next year, and then the kids are going to have all these stories in their head that you think they won't remember, but let me tell you, they do. Like, just be considerate of what you tell the kids, know your boundaries, and kind of what business you share, and especially if it's not your own. I don't know, did you have any problems like that, or?
But it's funny, like you talk about the younger and the older kids. I know the older kids price so much on like our business and stuff like that, but the younger kids, not so much. But they, they'll make gossip up if they see you talking to someone, like I said earlier on.
Mhm.
But I definitely saw this summer as the girls got older. Like I said, I've had my kids since they were like in the youngest division you can be in at camp. They start to realise, and they're not as naive as what maybe you think they were. To be honest, I know when my kids were in like freshman division, they knew what was happening when we were putting our makeups on and putting our mini
Yeah.
skirts on and corset tops on. Like the kids, they know. Do you know what I mean? But this year they started like prodding at us a bit more, being like, you're just going to the Waffle House, are you? Oh, yeah, you're just going to get waffles. Yeah, I'm sure you are. What, you going to the Waffle House dressed like that? Like, as they get older, they start to know more and realise more, and
Mhm.
just got to be so careful, because at the end of the day, you're not putting them in jeopardy. You're putting yourself in jeopardy, and you're putting yourself on the line. And all it does take is you accidentally say something you shouldn't have said, and then you are the person that's on the line, because you might be comfortable telling these stories, but then the next day you wake up and it's phone call day, and the kids get on the phone to the parents, and then all of a sudden the parents are on the phone to the division leader, or the parents are on the phone to the camp director, and the next thing you
Mhm.
know, you've shared an inappropriate conversation with the campers, and you're
Mhm.
packing your bags. Like, you just have to be so careful, and you have to remember what happens on nights off and what happens on days off. The kids don't need to know anything about. Yeah, you can tell them I went shopping, I went to Woodbury Commons, give them a haul. That's all well and good, but don't be going, oh yeah, James kissed Steph last night. Like, oh my God, don't say anything,
Yeah.
because you're just crossing a line and it's something you shouldn't do. And I
Mhm.
think it's easier to do as a returner if you have the same kids, because you have a close bond and you think you've got that trust there. But
Mhm.
don't mistake that trust for stepping over the line.
Yeah, I think the lines can quite easily like get blurred at camp in terms of because you're with them all the time, like you sometimes you do forget that it is a job. I think for me, because was obviously a little bit older going to camp, like I was still constantly very wary that like I'm 24 and the kids that I'm looking after are 16. But some people go to camp at the age of 18 as an international staff member and they could be looking after like 15-year-olds, and you're so close in age that almost like they do feel like your friends, and they are your friends. Like I would still class all my campers as my friends, my little besties, but like I'm the responsible adult, and you have to remember that sometimes. I feel like we did go off on a total tangent there, but that is also a really important topic. I think that
It is.
that needs to be discussed and for people to be reminded of. I think we should probably talk about as well is kind of like when you go back to camp, like you've obviously done everything or most things before. Did you find it better going back and knowing like how everything ran, or was it a little bit less exciting for you? Like how did you feel with it?
I think orientation was definitely less exciting because
Mm,
all of the sessions ran exactly the same. I knew everything that was going to happen. I knew everything that we were going to talk about. I knew all the stories that were going to be told. And
hmm.
like, it's important to have that refresher, but also at the same time, I found that I lost my attention span quite a bit more in orientation. And I looked
Hmm.
forward more to the night times where we had free time and we could just get to know each other.
Yeah.
Whereas actually come back in my third summer, I enjoyed it more because it was structured differently, even though it was the same sessions. And also they took on board like a lot of our feedback from the orientation. But then camping its actual self returning, although I found like orientation to be very repetitive and I didn't really enjoy it, what I liked was the fact that I knew all about like the camp events and what was coming up, and like we do
Hmm.
tournaments. So like we do a girls invitationals, a boys invitationals, which is basketball, and then loads of different camps come to us. Then we do a Las Bowl, which is a football tournament, not soccer for the UK guys out there, actually like American football. Um we do like a big Las Bowl tournament, and it was so fun going to them. I thought like the novelty would wear off of the big events because I've already done them before, and I think
Hmm.
they're really exciting as a first timer. But it was so fun to like know the structure of everything, know like how to get your kids ready for stuff and how to get the kids out and where we need to be and stuff like that for them. And then obviously you have like our big tournaments where we have an Olympics, and it's a day event. You split up into, I think it's 4 or 5 different teams, the whole of camp. It's split into colours, and I kind of knew what was going on, so I felt more prepared and more ready for that. And then obviously colour war as well. It's like a 5 day event, and I've got to admit, in my first summer, I found it so draining, and it was so long because it was constantly on the go, and even though it was the first time doing all of these activities, it kind of it was just so much. Whereas
Hmm.
going into my second summer, I was prepared for how like intense the 5 days run, and then also it allowed me to be able to like have an understanding and be able to like help my co-counselors out that were first timers. How did you find like the events as well, like going back into like your second summer?
Same as you. Like, obviously, it made everything a lot easier because you knew what was happening, and like you kind of know the structure of camp, and it's like, okay, we've got college week coming up. I know what college week is now. I know what we're gonna do. Like, it's nice kind of being a little bit more prepared. But I obviously my second summer, I went back as a lead counselor, and during, I don't know if it's the same for you, during our like college week and Olympics, you obviously need judges to judge the events, and leads and leadership were judges. So I actually only really participated in my like college week and Olympics the first time I was there. And the past 2 summers I've been a judge, and I have a very love-hate relationship with it. Like it's nice kind of not having not having the stress of thinking, oh my god, there's going to be a staff round and I'm going to have to participate in the triathlon. Although they did do judges rounds, but I really, 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 really just hate standing and having to watch. I would so much rather be standing on the sideline, be a part of a team, or like taking part in like majority of the, do you know what, I'd take part in most of the counselor rounds. It was just the triathlon that stressed me out a little bit. Whereas obviously being a judge, I'm the one that's refereeing the soccer, I'm refereeing the football, I'm refereeing kickball. I have no experience in, I don't know what even is kickball. And I've got the kids shouting at me like, this was out, this was out. So although I do still really love Olympics and College Week, I also have like a total different viewpoint of it now as a lead. So it's like a little bit harder, I think, being a judge, because I just want to take part. That was a total ramble.
But I totally no, I totally get that though. So like our judges are usually people that have been in colour war themselves and
Mm-hmm.
you know have progressed all the way up and been generals. And I think they do kind of miss because they're so used to being a part of it. They miss being a part of it because you can't be cheer on like a team. You've kind of got to be there, and you are the person that gets shouted at, and you are the person
Yeah.
that's like you said, you didn't call this, you didn't do this, and kids can be brutal when they're playing sport. I must say, like they can be brutal, and sometimes I stand there and watch it, and I'm like, guys, this isn't very camp spirit. This isn't very starfish of you kids. So let's calm down a little bit. While the judge on the sidelines is nearly crying because they've just had all this abuse.
Literally me. I'm like sat there in these games and I'm like, guys, I literally don't know the rules. I was like, I'm making half of this up. I'm like really just relying on you guys to cooperate with me.
Obviously, I know, like in your second summer, you went back in a different role. So,
Mhm.
how was that? Obviously, one, you had all the feels of being a returner, but two, you were stepping into a new role. Like, how was that transition? How did you find it?
I mean we briefly discussed this like in an episode that we put out the other week about how I feel like I did struggle a bit. I think maybe this is part of the reason why like my second summer, although I really obviously loved it, I still went back for a third. But like I did struggle a little bit more. I felt like the role that I was in, although I enjoyed it and I do like having that bit extra responsibility, the way it was structured, I don't know, I was not like disappointed in myself, but I think kind of feeling like I was supposed to be in charge of three grades of kids and I could only really focus my attention on one. It did make me feel a bit like I'm not doing as good of a job as I should be. Um, and also like little things like we went on, obviously with 10th graders, they get to go on this insane trip to Orlando. You're there for a week and you go to Disney, you go to Universal, you go to Cocoa Beach and you do all this fun stuff. And I remember there was myself and Scott, who was the boys' lead. Um, we were kind of leading this whole trip. You know, we were like the ones in charge and responsible really for the decision making. It just like little things had happened, and one of the girls had lost their bag, and I was like, it had all our like wallet in it, it had all our money, it had our cards to get into Disney, to get into Universal, and that had went missing. And little things like, you know, like people like testing the waters, trying to stay up past curfew when you're in the hotels, and boys trying to get on girls' floors and vice versa. All these like extra things that you have to worry about on trips. It kind of like just boiled over a little bit. And I remember I went to Disney Springs to pick up the girl's bag, a little Lululemon fanny pack that she'd lost. Thank God it got recovered. I remember like phoning my mum and literally like I think she could tell something was wrong. She was like, "Are you okay?" And then I just started sobbing on the phone to my mum, and I was like, "I'm literally in Disney. I'm getting paid to be in Disney right now. It's meant to be the happiest place on earth, but here I am crying to my mum on the phone." At that point she definitely thought I would not be going back, but here I am getting ready to go back for a fourth summer. So it just shows that although it can be really stressful at times, and I did kind of find the role quite stressful, it does get better, because I don't think I had one of those crying episodes this summer.
But going back,
Yeah.
like second summer, I was in a bit of a different position to you because I was going back in my second summer in the same role. So I
Mhm.
kind of felt like I had to know everything. I found it a little bit more stressful. Like if there wasn't something if there was something I didn't know the question to for a newbie,
Mhm.
like it would stress me out and I'd be like, am I doing a good enough job? Like
Yeah.
I should know all of this stuff. But then on the other hand, the stuff that I did know and the stuff I did remember and the stuff I was able to help like the newbies with, it was like the most amazing feeling because like what you said earlier on, I didn't want to feel like a know-it-all, but it was nice to be able to be the person that could answer all the questions. So going into second summer and like my first summer as a returner, I was in the same role. but I found it probably more daunting because I was supposed to, well, not that I was supposed to know everything, but I felt like in myself I should have known everything, and there was stuff I still
Mhm.
didn't know or stuff I didn't remember. But going into my third summer in my new role as like a group lead, that was just as scary, if not scarier, because I was taking on like a leadership position with all
Mhm.
of like my general counsellor background, which like thankfully, I remembered everything I needed to remember. But I definitely think my third summer, I was nervous to go into the role that I was in, but once it started, I felt like I almost thrived in the position in
Yeah.
terms of like my relationship with the kid. Going into a new role, my third summer was the right time. And then obviously my fourth summer, fingers crossed, I'm hoping
Mhm.
that I can be like group lead for my girls again and hopefully get to take them on trip. Although if they lose a fanny pack, I can just imagine how they'll react because I'm sure it'll also have money in and they won't be able to
Mhm.
buy the Hershey Kisses shorts that they all want to buy and the Reese's Pieces jumpers.
That must be some serious camp law because the same happens at mine. The eighth graders go to Hershey World and they all come back with the boxers, like the Kisses
Yeah,
boxers or the Reese's Pieces boxers. Like they all come back with it, and even like all the staff, and then they'll just wear them around camp on an evening all the time. It's so funny.
guaranteed from when they get back off trip for at least a week, every night it'll be right. Tonight we're wearing the Hershey Kisses boxers. Tomorrow we're
Mhm.
gonna wear our Pieces sweatshirts. Then the next night they're gonna be out in whatever else they've bought there, Jolly Ranch or something. It's like it's so funny. You can tell when they've been on that trip.
I think I'm the same though, because every single trip that I've been on, I've got a serious habit of like collecting t-shirts. And I've got my Penn State t-shirt, my UCLA t-shirt from this summer, little past summers. I've got my Ron John tops from when we went to Cocoa Beach. Like, I've got a solid collection of t-shirts coming through, and I love wearing them at camp. I think we've like covered so much. Again, every single time we do these episodes, I feel like there's more that I could talk about and more things that we could cover. But I think like for me, the biggest takeaway, if anyone is listening and you are going to camp as a returner next year, whether that be like for your second, third, or fourth summer, just especially if it's your second, just know that you are probably going to go back and camp's not going to be the same. It's not all going to be the same people, and you're going to get there and you might find it a little bit harder at first. And if you do, then that's like absolutely fine. It's hard and it will be different, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a great summer. Like obviously we both said like we had summers that we went back where we struggled a bit more, but we're still both sitting here getting ready to go back for our fourth summer next year. So it's not always the end of the world.
I think also, like, I was very guilty in my second summer of comparing everything to my first summer.
Hmm.
Comparing everything that happened, every event, every day off, I compared to the first summer, and I was like, it's not the same. Like, I don't know if I'm enjoying it as much. But going into my third summer, I was like, right, that's it. No comparisons. It's a new
Hmm.
summer. Not necessarily forget about what's happened previous summers, but take yourself away from it. This summer is its own, and I think that's my one bit of advice for returners is just try your hardest, and it's easy to do, and no doubt you'll do it.
Hmm.
Just try not to compare, because when you compare, you're not going to have the same outcome, and then you're more likely to, you know, put a less kind of enthusiastic sight on things as what
Hmm.
you did your first summer. So just try not to compare because you'll be your own worst enemy if you do it. Because I was my own worst enemy doing it.
There's a saying, isn't it? It's like comparison is the thief of joy. Or I could be totally making
Oh,
that up, but I
well,
think it is a saying.
that's
Mic
brilliant.
drop.
And on that note,
Goodbye. Yeah, on that note, mic drop.
yeah,
Comparison is the thief of joy.
yeah,
Thank you for listening to the episode, everybody.
yeah, new episode released Monday next week.
Mhm. Hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.